Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Create Capacity with Technology and Lean Six Principles. First and foremost, we hope that you and your loved ones are happy, healthy, and staying safe. For today's webinar, Wolters, Kluwer, Mark McAndrew, Director of Product Management, and Peter Higgins, Senior Technology Support Specialist, will discuss the importance of leveraging technology and workflow automation to streamline business process, minimize risk, and deliver superior client service results. Before I hand it over to our presenters, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. Wolters Kluwer CCH is registered with NASPA as a sponsor of continuing professional education on the National Registry of CPE sponsors. As such, we are excited to offer one CPE credit for today's webinar. A total of 4 polls will be conducted throughout the presentation, and you'll need to participate in 3 of them in order to receive CPE credit. If you experience any technical difficulties when trying to submit your poll response, please make sure you let us know in the questions pane. This way we can record your answer manually. Your CPA certificate will be sent to the email used to register for the webinar within 5 business days after the session. If you don't receive your certificate, please email us at marketing@xcmsolutions.com. Please note, CPE is not available when viewing the on-demand version of this webinar. You'll have the opportunity to submit questions by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel. We'll be answering questions at the end of the session. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we'll be sure to follow up afterwards. You will also have the opportunity to complete a survey about the webinar, our content, learning objectives, and more at the end of the presentation. This survey will also be sent to you in a follow-up email. We appreciate you taking the time to participate in this survey so we can continue to deliver meaningful content in future presentations. Without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Mark McAndrew and Peter Higgins.
Great, Alyssa, thank you very much. This is Mark McAndrew, I'm the Director of Product Management here at Wolters Kluwer, specifically the firm management product set. I'm excited to be joined today with Peter. Together, we'll present hopefully a quality presentation for you related to Lean Six and workflow and productivity tools. Peter, quick introduction, if you will.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Peter Higgins. I perform as a solution architect, so I work with customers to look at the different ways XCM can help automate, streamline their processes. Happy to be chatting with you guys today.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Before we dive into the content at large, a quick overview and agenda. We'll talk a bit about the company, the product set, and then dive straight into what we would call workflow, workforce challenges, and ultimately some strategies to standardize your business process against those challenges. Peter will focus fairly heavily on the lean side of Lean Six and some customer samples around tax preparation and I believe the financial statement production process towards the end. But ultimately, the goal today is to help you learn how to take your challenges and the potential for deploying Lean Six projects internally or exploring Lean Six in more detail post-session back to your business. And we'll conclude with a quick Q&A. Now, as Alyssa mentioned, before we dive in and throughout this presentation, we will have a number of polling questions to ensure this is eligible for CPE. Alyssa?
Great, thank you, Mark. We'll start with the first polling question, and it is, what was your firm's biggest challenge over the last year? Remote or hybrid work technologies, staff scheduling needs, shifting tax deadlines, new legislations, or other. We'll give everyone about 30 seconds to complete the first polling question. And as a reminder, you'll have to participate in at least 3 of the 4 in order to receive your CPE certificate. Just about 5 more seconds. And I will close the poll and share the results and turn it back to you, Mark.
Great, thank you. And as we look at these results, before we shift over to the content today, it looks like staff scheduling needs against shifting tax deadlines are some of the more complicated challenges we've experienced over the last year, perhaps the last several years now, with a fair representation around remote and others. So ultimately, our goal today is to help combat those challenges with some nice shift in productivity, workflow, and workforce management, and ultimately tie Lean Six to how to overcome those obstacles. So what do we mean by workflow and workforce challenges? Well, over the last 12 months, What we at Wolters Kluwer have noticed and have observed is that there's been a number of obstacles with staffing. We're now on what might be tax season 2, related to work from home requirements or business decisions around a remote work environment. We see more and more firms taking a digital approach to their workflow, their scheduling, their business process, and how they interact with their customers. We've seen that new deadlines, both with IRS changes to deadlines and with new relief legislation, that staff have had to work within really a new ecosystem as it relates to providing meaningful service to their customers. From a management standpoint, managing remote staff and keeping staff engaged has been ever present. With new staff coming aboard, getting them scheduled effectively, getting them connected to the right engagements, ensuring that we have the appropriate process to deal with the challenge. Ultimately, looking at new ways to serve clients, and then maintaining that firm productivity while doing so. I think overall, what we can look at when we think of the last 12 months is that remote work has become front and center to all of us. Our customers expect our ability to engage them remotely, not always in person, and the technology and processes we put in place need to complement that. So what we've seen throughout the tax season, we've been maintaining in our database a collection of tax statistics from the perspective of preparing, reviewing, e-filing returns. We see across the nation a number of data points. We thought we'd share that with the audience today. As we think about the last several years, the last 3 years of tax season, not surprisingly, as we get into April and move through, the work not started is tailed off considerably when looked at in relation to the 2019 pre-COVID season. But we do see this prior year a bounce back both with work that is being engaged, work that's in process, and work that has been completed as we exited what this year was a May deadline. Now, as we look to September and October, we'll continue to push these trends through blogs that we make available, and we'll continue to keep our users and our customers abreast of these trends. But ultimately, what that tells us, and what that should tell you, 2020 was a challenging tax season. The 2021 year, current year, that challenge was met head on by all of you, and we've seen the ability for our firms to take the technologies they have access to, their manner for how they can improve their business processes within them, and really start to acclimate themselves to what is a new approach to getting business done with customers. But when we think of that process, and we think of those challenges in the landscape related to your employees and your staff, we know that getting work done and being productive involves an element of being busy, both with work priorities and otherwise. Well, why are we so busy? There are more and more generations in the workplace these days with different approaches to how they've completed their core responsibilities, and many different approaches to technology. The pace of business has continued to increase, irrespective of the obstacles with keeping people engaged. The distributed workforce that we see today only increases the challenges for maintaining that productivity, ensuring that our teams are loaded to capacity and they're connected to the right work. We know that competing and changing priorities, both professionally and personally, come into play, and we have to balance those against a number of high-pressure deadlines within the space that we operate. Ultimately, shifting to the COVID-19 landscape and the way that we now do work has changed the way that people are busy. Improving your business process and connecting your technology and standardizing approaches couldn't be more essential than it is today. Well, we think, why are we so busy? Let's go straight to the punchline. We're so busy doing our jobs, in some cases we can't get any work done. We're reacting to the issue of the day. We're moving forward with getting work done heads down without realizing another priority might take its place. Our communication channels are much different than they have been previously. And ultimately, this can create a frustrating and difficult challenge for all of us to live within. Now, where do we come into play here? Well, as it relates to today and the session that we're talking about now, standardizing business process and ensuring that we have a unified front to how our work is put through that process and eliminate the revisions we have, the personal preferences that exist. This will be core to all of us as we think about increasing our capacity in getting the work done as we grow our businesses and we work through a compressed tax season, a season where we might have resource constraints, but ultimately we need to ensure that our capacity is at focus. So when I say capacity, well, let's ask what decreases your capacity when we think about business process, when we think about workflow, when we think about productivity. What can decrease capacity within our business channels? Well, on one end, an increased workload, whether it's growing your business, whether it's the amount of time between deadlines to do work or rework work previously done, whether it's regulatory changes, deadline shifts, ultimately reacting to issues that are outside of our control. This increased workload plus dysfunctional process management ultimately can lead to what we would term significant or hard to overcome bottlenecks. If our team members have a lack of clarity in their work expectation, if a tax preparer comes from one CPA firm into your own and they don't understand the business processes you put in place and they have a lack of clarity of how to get that done through your channels, or if there's no business process in place and we're essentially winging it. Whether we have too many meetings to update our team members, we have Excel throughout all of our process, or we're leveraging a number of different systems, or we have a ton of manual process management outcomes. Dysfunctional process management coupled with an increased workload is simply going to cause a strain on our process and create bottlenecks where our goal is to have work put through that process efficiently, correctly the first time, and ultimately done the right way. Well, what is better business process? I think the first thing we all need to do is recognize that changing and unforeseen priorities are unavoidable. Whether it's picking someone up from school, whether it's someone sick at home and involved in your day that you weren't expecting, whether it's multiple customers having equal time with you for challenges that they feel are top priority. If we can identify the most effective business process to standardize and deal with our tax processes, our audit processes, our accounting processes, and we can use technology to embed those standardizations into the day-to-day, we can establish better business process and get to the root cause of what we're dealing with as it relates to reduction in capacity, creating these bottlenecks, and ultimately delivering an unsuccessful end result for a client expectation standpoint. Well, when we talk about root cause of risk, I think what's interesting and what we've seen is that more than 50%, from a tax standpoint, more than 50% of tax material weakness reported in the United States is wholly driven by a lack of a review, a lack of a personnel, or poor process execution. So now think of process. Think of the review processes in place for your tax return process, for reviewing financial statements, for getting your monthly close of your customers on time effectively. A lack of review, a lack of personnel, or a poor process execution accounts for 50% of that tax material weakness. Now, there's some other statistics here where different people, or majority of people, have cited specifics. But I think that 50% really is telling. If it's a lack of standards, or it's the inability to control them, ultimately, this is where business process improvement projects with Lean Six come into play, where technology that enables you to take what you've done through a Lean Six Sigma project internally and apply it to your own business come into play, and where the two, technology and process, really come together. It's important as you evaluate in the marketplace for your own solutions that you have the ability to create your custom business process. I could tell you that nearly every CPA firm has a very specific and standard prep and review process for a tax return. I can probably provide you with 80% of that process across all CPA firms throughout the United States of America, and perhaps even into Canada. But each of you will have your own special sauce, your own specific way of doing business. So make sure that building to your business process is possible and not just taking a framework or best practice and holding that up as what you do for your customers. You want to make sure that all projects, all tasks, all due dates, you can capture in a system. If you have one system of record that has your tax, audit, and accounting due dates, both from a statutory filing deadline or from targeting deadlines in one system, all the better. Your resources, their availability, who's assigned to what, how much capacity do they have to take on more. Ultimately, optimizing your business process, training that into your teams, agreeing to that process, establishing it as a fundamental approach to what you do will help you control that essential service delivery model that you're looking to create. If you can establish firm-wide stages, a system that controls tax and audit and accounting, you can then start to cross-collaborate in addition to controlling your own outcomes. Before we dive into the Lean and the Six Sigma and how those apply, I'd like you to take with you moving forward in today's session 6 key practice workflow elements. Standardization. Standardization is key. Don't allow personal preference of that one tax partner to do what he or she or they believe is best. We need to standardize across the business. There needs to be a way to delegate, creating dynamic checklists or controls that allow you as someone in charge of an engagement to parse out work to those responsible or have them automated through your process. A way to communicate and collaborate within that communication channel with your teams, with the new team members that come aboard, and ultimately ensure that the way you work your review processes, your prep cycles, the way that you get financial statements produced internally and out to customers, the knowledge and instruction, the obstacles, the questions, there needs to be a centralized way to communicate and get that done. Some predictability. If we can create and manage the recurrences that occur, the same monthly activities happen each month, the same documentation is required, the same information and insight is needed. If we can create predictability, we can eliminate variation and get the right work to the right people automatically based on the technologies that we deploy. From a collaboration standpoint, make it easy for your customers to work with you and make your internal resources, your staff, easy to work with one another. And then from a visibility standpoint, if you're a partner that needs to understand your book of business, if you're someone that runs the firm or a tax service line or an industry group, having a system in place that gets you the info when you need it is critical. Asking others to provide you status updates only takes them out of the rotation for doing work and reduces their capacity. Using systems, technology, and processes that centralize this information and provide you with clarity and visibility becomes all the more important as you work remotely. Now, before we move forward and start to dive into Peter's part of the process, Melissa, let's go to our next polling question.
Great, thank you, Mark. We're going to launch our second polling question. It is, what is your top efficiency challenge? Lack of standardized process, long turnaround time caused by inefficiencies, not enough staff during busy season, or other. And we'll give everyone just about 15 more seconds to complete the second polling question. All right, just about 5 more seconds and we'll close out the poll. Okay, and I will share the results and turn it back over to you, Mark.
Awesome, thank you. So before we move forward, just to look at the results of these polling questions, we see that long turnaround time caused by inefficiency seems to be the leader in the clubhouse, followed very closely by a lack of standardized processes. While we can always say there's not enough staff to get the work done, and we do have some responders indicating that as such, if we can standardize the process and reduce turnaround times, be it wait time on getting information from our customers, wait time and introducing the next step in the process, or standardizing the process to reduce those variations, ultimately those two together, which Lean Six Sigma really addresses here, will allow us to increase staff capacity and help us in regards to not having enough staff during busy season. So now as we move forward, we start to talk through Lean Six Sigma principles. Peter Higgins is going to walk us through a number of opportunities to learn and apply what we learn to our practice. Peter?
Thanks, Mark. So first we'll take a look at high-level frame for Lean Six Sigma and how to go ahead and think about that. The two elements when you think of Lean versus Six Sigma, they're both originally separate disciplines. So Six Sigma really came into play in the 80s by Motorola. Really, the goal there was to compete against Kaizen or Lean manufacturing, which is popular in Japan. Lean Six Sigma incorporates a bit of both processes. So you see a bit on the Lean side as well as the Six Sigma on the quality side. When we talk about velocity, think about efficiency, right? How quickly can we move an item, a task, a process from start to finish? What's involved there? Can it be faster? And we think about speeding up the throughput, right? Along the lines of efficiency, but just in terms of total time, how much effort does it take to move an item from start to finish? And then of course, as we can create efficiencies, we're gonna gain capacity. When we think about the Six Sigma side or the quality side of the equation, a lot of the focus really comes down to limiting or eliminating defects, quality issues. And as Mark had mentioned earlier, part of that is by limiting variation, right? So the more we can standardize, follow a standard process that's highly repeatable, the higher quality we're going to see. So we say, why Six Sigma? You'll see the quote at the bottom from legendary CEO from General Electric, Jack Welch, noting how important it was. GE gets a lot of, I think, the press or the credit for really introducing Lean Six Sigma or Six Sigma in US manufacturing. It certainly was a competitive advantage that really took on growth, particularly in the manufacturing industries through the US. The Lean Six Sigma variation really took place more in the 1990s and then became widely accepted as well. But the reason we look at Six Sigma is really right, the dramatic improvements, particularly in quality, productivity, and services. Of course, with higher quality, think of your brand, how important that is. It's going to drive customer satisfaction, loyalty, etc. But it's a competitive advantage, right? Having higher quality, more efficient, particularly as you now think about cost reductions, right? If we can produce the same service with high quality at a lower cost than our competitors, of course, that's a huge advantage, right? And it's going to lead to more money, higher margins, more prosperity. So when we think about applying Lean Six, obviously there are a couple of challenges to think about up front. Two of the big ones that stand out are the lack of standardization or inconsistent processes, and then lengthy turnaround times, often result of those inefficiencies, defects, errors. And so as we lean out the process, typical steps going to be to map out, right, process flow, what that actually looks like, and document where we have opportunities to add more standardization. One of the goals here is that we're going to identify the top sources of inefficiencies, right, and identify or make or propose the necessary changes to eliminate or reduce them. And so at the end of the exercise, what we can hope for is a standardized process, potentially checklists, documentation, SOPs, things to really standardize again what that process is going to look like and make it more consistent. And of course, eliminating those top inefficiencies that we'd identified. Here we'll jump into some examples related to tax prep and the process there. So here's the thing about defects. You can see as we're moving from left to right, from scanning through prep, those open items coming out of prep, review, and then of course finalization. And so in terms of defects, that's where that loop is taking place. So we're going to review, back to prepare, right? And so think back to inefficiencies, turnaround time being two of the big issues. Certainly that's a significant driver there. So the more we can streamline, eliminate those up front, the better our process is going to be. And the notes that pop there, right, the two clear ones which we touched on, the rework and the fixing, right? That's always going to be time consuming. So we think about a solution here, checklists, like what we use in XCM. Now we can clearly define, here are the 5, 6, 10, whatever they are, steps related to preparation. As that moves through, the reviewer can clearly see those items have been identified. As the reviewer maybe starts to see certain things pop up from a trend, from an error or inconsistencies, those can always be added to the checklist, even on the fly. So we can really start to eliminate, reduce those errors that are resulting from non-standard process. And then managing the front door comment here related to the status, that's really about keeping controls as work's coming in all the way through the process. So where does the software, where does XCM fit in? When we think of process standardization, what we're looking here, the first column, you can see the checklist item descriptions. Second, we're seeing the status related to the workflow of that process as it's moving along, and then the role. And so we're really taking specific items, assigning them to a particular status. So in this example here, the first 4 items are all going to be performed as part of initial planning. The roles for those steps are also carved out. So we know some of those responsibilities belong to the admin. The last item belongs to the tax manager. And so checklists like this can be set up for any process where we'll identify what steps take place by each status and who across the firm is responsible. That's our standardization. When we think of wait times or bottlenecks, lost time that we can't get back. Again, as we scale from scan from left to right, you can see based on size, when you think about the resources and capacity here, certainly the review is often the most limited resource, which creates a bottleneck. And so right, the important question is how do we improve this process, knowing that review can be a limited resource to make it go more smoothly, consistently, and eliminate those bottlenecks. And so that's where XCM can come in to help. There are 2 elements on this page. The XCM resource allocator on the top here. This is used particularly on the tax side. And rather than trying to take returns and assign them to people on specific dates, because that can tend to be a fairly burdensome process to maintain those, what this allows you to do is get a snapshot in real time of exactly how much work each person has on their plate at any point in time. And so as work is routed to a staff, the budget hours related to that status. So say I have a 5-hour preparation budget, that's going to show here in those first 3 columns. Tasks on my view are tasks assigned to me. When that work is completed and they move it on to the next person, they're going to go -5 for those hours. The next series of columns, the in process, not on my view, the next 3 columns, that's for work that's in flight today, but it's with someone else. And so let's take the example of a return that's in preparation, but I have some hours as a reviewer. So those hours there, those budget hours are going to show in the in process, not in my view. And so what that allows you to do as work comes in the door is you can, in real time, see how much work everyone has on their plate or who has the most capacity to be assigned a new task, as well as what's in the pipeline or momentarily going their way. So you can see both of those in hand. Towards the bottom, the unassigned view, that's our pool or shelf, if you will. And so as work comes in, it's scanned, ready to go into prep. We don't have a specific person that we necessarily want to work on it, so we move it into the unassigned pool. As a preparer, I'm simply going out there as I have capacity, looking for one and assigning it to myself. And there was a difficulty, that's the D column to the left of the client name. And so a lot of firms will use that just to clarify the complexity or difficulty level of that return so that the right level of staff is taking down that work.
Awesome, thanks, Peter. Before we move on in our overview today, I'd like all of you on the line on this call to really think about the technology you've invested in or that you're researching. Finding a workflow system that can not only provide your team members with what am I doing now, but also what am I doing in the future. Those types of workflow systems will allow you to then provide insight to your leaders into the overall team and where work becomes available to move or where team members have availability to draw from. Whether you are providing your team members with the opportunity to pull for themselves work from a shelf process, in this example, the unassigned shelf, or if you have a scheduling team that looks at availability and then allocates or sprinkles the infield of those team members, whether it's preparers or reviewers. Ultimately, you want a system that fits into your process and that can evolve with you as you change that process and scale your business. And before we move forward, we have another polling question. Melissa?
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to launch the poll. It is, when are you thinking about implementing Lean Six Sigma principles? We have already started implementing as soon as possible in the next 1 to 3 years. We're not sure, not planning on implementing, or other. We'll give everyone about 15 more seconds. About 5 more seconds to complete the third polling question. Okay, we will close the poll and share the results. Back to you, Mark.
Awesome, thank you. Let's take a look at these results. So as we think about interest in taking Lean Six to your own businesses, I will say that here at Wolters Kluwer, we work with a number of Lean Six consultants in the industry who either help ramp up your employees to take projects internally, who help certify those employees as green belts or black belts, or ultimately who can help impart wisdom into the types of templates, controls, or really the tools necessary to effectively work your own Lean Six process. And that's what we're going to take a look at as we move forward. Some of those tools and approaches that you can take from today, ask us following the session for examples, or that we can put you in touch with other consultants in the industry that can help you define your projects. But when you think about Lean Six and you think about implementing something as soon as possible or in the next 1 to 3 years, there's a number of guides that you can follow. For those that have already started implementing Lean Six and improvement processes, be sure that you have the technology to control the outcome that provides you clarity into, are we achieving success with what we set out to do? So as I turn it back over to Peter, we'll talk now about bringing Lean Six to your own business. Peter?
Great. So here we're going to take a look at the DMAIC, the DMAIC, which are the acronyms for the define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Those are the key 5 elements to the Lean Six methodology. So as we look across each of those, defining the exercise up front, so project description, project plans, thinking about the team who's involved in our goals. Obviously a critical first step that we're really very specific, or as specific as we can be about what we're looking to accomplish with the exercise. When we think about measurement, that's going to be key always. So both as we start out our Lean Six Sigma process as well as ongoing. Really critical that we have a way to understand how well we are doing and how we're meeting our objectives. Typically though, as we're starting out, that might be a value stream map, a process map, looking again for those inefficiencies, how to identify them and prioritize where we're going to fix them. When we think about the analysis or analyze, for me it is our failure mode and effects analysis. So thinking about where things can go wrong in the process, in sub-processes all the way through, really identifying those, trying to cut them off before they become problems or eliminate them. Of course, bottlenecks, and Lean Six Sigma does have a series of definitions for different types of waste. And so we would want to routinely think through the 9 categories, which ones are applicable, where can we potentially see some gains or efficiencies. And we think about root cause and why tools, understanding when we see efficiencies, truly get into the root cause. If we don't understand the root cause, it's very challenging to fix the problem. When we think about improvement, so where can we make those gains, those opportunities? We mentioned managing the front door or the work, the information on its way in, ensuring that we're consistent, we have a quality process to take that work in effectively. Identifying those bottlenecks and then smoothing the work out where we can, right? How do we, knowing where those bottlenecks are, how do we make sure that the process is going to run as cleanly as possible? What do we need to do? Certainly the consistency we've touched on, whether that's the checklist, the workflow statuses themselves, but trying to standardize as much as possible that process end to end. And then on the control side, so after we have really designed, fixed it, we're measuring, making the improvements, and then it's controlling from that spot forward. So thinking about the summary of our future state, how does this process work now? The documentation, the training, all of the materials that go with that, making sure our team, our staff members all understand their expectations, roles and responsibilities, and we're all moving to the beat of the same drum. Perhaps we have new metrics, measurements, different way to track, but again, that measurement's always going to be critical for us to know that we are following the process effectively, or perhaps there are additional opportunities for improvement. And that generally is one of the goals here, is continuous improvement. So as we continue to measure and monitor, we're always looking for those opportunities for a cleaner, smarter, faster, leaner process. Next couple of slides, we'll jump into these in a little more detail. So from the define standpoint, think about a project charter, project plan. And we want to have some clearly defined goals. Right? What are we trying to do with this exercise? Whether it's focusing on the speediness or the turnaround throughout the process, creating more visibility. So even just how we make sure everyone is aware of the work that's out there, its current status, where it's at, who has it, those types of things. Ensuring the quality, again, a lot of that's going to come through that standardization. So the checklists, clearly defining roles and responsibilities, making sure that we have a feedback loop to identify where we have additional opportunities to improve the process to drive quality. And then, of course, reducing rework. So looking at those feedback loops where we're finding errors, omissions, things like that. And again, streamlining by improving the process further to make sure we can eliminate those to the best of our ability. On the team side, we need a champion, a sponsor or executive sponsor, likely a leader to drive the project from a day-to-day, tax manager, project manager type. Ideally, it's someone with enough understanding of both kind of the bottom, how the process works, the intricacies of those processes, as well as the top, our goals, objectives, managing the staff, etc. And then here we say some cross-functional team members, but think about people who are participating in different steps or phases of the process. So it might be a couple of tax preparers, a scanning resource, an admin. Think about the different perspectives that we want to include in this process. And then we note special guests, but think about rotating people in as contributors, subject matter experts, leveraging some of the knowledge and views around the firm. Next, we shift to measure. So in this example, a value stream map or a process map. And even if you don't have a lot of experience here, write some simple step shapes tools to get started in that process. Whether you're using a Visio, an Excel product, or even PowerPoint, just putting it down into paper sometimes makes it very eye-opening. It can be very powerful, allowing everyone to kind of see the process, but also where those opportunities to improve it or the efficiencies are coming from. Here, as we think about the analyze step or phase, you're looking at a traditional tax season here. You see in January 1st from the bottom left. As we move into February, the season gets going. That's our information request, the preparation phase or the bulk of. We get to March 1st, we say the heat is on, right? And that's where we're in the review. It's the fixing of the prep, the rework, the errors, things like that, circling back to the preparer group. And then as we get into April through the 15th, typically that's the frenzy, right? It's getting the returns filed and finalized. And so an opportunity here is to really move these steps, these phases earlier back. And so by moving that process, so requesting the information earlier, starting prep earlier, gives us a chance to also shift the review and fixing the prep up. All of this now is creating additional time towards the end of March when we're usually very busy or more capacity, making that process hopefully a bit more easy for us. When we think about improvement, again, we'll think about consistency being a key driver there. What we're looking at here is a sample workflow for an audit process. And so we have statuses cascading from top left to bottom right. So think of an audit as it begins, moves through scheduling, et cetera, all the way down through to the completed status. Within XCM, typically that's how they're structured, although you have full flexibility. You could have more or less steps that can be called anything you'd like. But the goal is that you really have a consistent process to move the work from start to finish. And when you look at the icons that are included on some of those status bars, you'll see a little checkbox item that's letting you know that there are specific checklist steps related to that status. The concept would be if this task, this audit is assigned to me for planning, I'm going to complete those checklist steps related to planning before I move it on to field work. And so the work continues to move, and it's those related or assigned checklist steps, as well as the sign-offs, which you can see there, that keep the process consistent one after another, regardless of who's working on it. On the top right, where we see opt-in statuses, those are additional feedback loops. And so, for example, rather than moving a task back to, say, the preparer, to say that it's back in prep, I can use a status like open review points. They're going to see that on their workload, their to-do list with that status, and know that it's come back to them with some questions, some review notes from their manager. After they're addressed, they'll go back to the manager with a cleared review point status. And so those are optional, but it does give you more information. So rather than seeing just that it's gone back and forth several times, seeing that it's, say, in cleared review points lets me know that it's at least been through one round of reviews. Some questions, review notes were posted. Those have now been addressed. It just gives me a better sense of the true underlying status of the work. And these are going to be built out during the implementation phase. So you'll be working with our Lean Six Sigma consultants, and they're going to work through your process, how it best maps or aligns with something like this. But again, they're fully customizable, configurable. So you can have as many statuses, any names, more or less checklists. It really comes down to kind of firm culture, structure, and preference, and how you'd really like it to work.
Now, Peter, one thing I'd like to kind of offer now as we think about what you've walked the team through. Throughout the course of my career, I've worked with a number of CPA firms, and we focused on a number of different areas of focus. Taking your example for improvement to a real world, real working example around the financial statement production process. So if we go back to establishing process alignment and all of the different elements of what goes into completing these phases, I'd like everyone today to really think about what that means for you. You have benefit plan partners, you have audit partners, perhaps not-for-profit team members that have a little different process than the non-public audit team group. You have senior managers and managers. Well, all of these individuals, they're competing for the same types of resources as it relates to this example. So what we want to ensure you do, or have the opportunity to do, is not just define a single process called audit and say, here's our map, this is what it looks like, we're done, but to really look at the benefit plan process and what those team members need. An SEC audit or PCAOB audit team, the not-for-profit team, and what those teams need. The different constituents in that audit, senior managers and managers might have different requests or requirements than partners do. But ultimately, your firm is working with a specific set of resources, whether it's one or many technical reviewers, whether it's one or many production resources, or perhaps it's seniors and associates that are the production resources at your firm. But ultimately, you need to look for, or I'd encourage you to look for, a solution that can be put in place where when you improve the process, you've kind of coalesced all of the different systems in your control into a singular unified front. The benefit plan partner providing assembly instructions or delivery instructions or requests for drafts or final copies of financial statements is following the same channels as that audit partner follows, as that senior manager follows on their engagements, as the in-charge follows. Ultimately, what this will do is eliminate the variance as it relates to where information is collected and where these resources need to go to obtain it, and ensure that the way you're moving through your process is consistent. Even if a benefit plan has different stages or steps or sign-off requirements than other parts of your practice, knowing that you're consistently providing information and others are obtaining insights from the process in the same way only helps to improve what you're doing and ensure that those unique approaches individuals take is eliminated, and the consistent back and forth related to rework or re-asking for information is removed from your process, increasing the collaboration with your team members, and ultimately delighting the end consumer with respect to hitting your deadlines on time and doing so in a manner that you are confident what you've done is done to the highest caliber of your capability. So Peter, I'll turn it back over to you as it relates to the next phase.
The last step of the DMAIC is the control. And so here you can see examples of some of the things that will contribute to our summary of the future state. So now we're going to have complete process documentation. We think back to future state measurements, whether that's dates, milestones, resources, how all those things fit in. And again, potentially new metrics, new measurements from what we've used historically. Think about roles and responsibilities, clarity around each person's role, how it fits in. Maybe beyond what we have had in the past. In general, the communication, the buy-in, right, getting the whole group involved, right, bringing everyone up to speed. the layers of training that are going to go in, making sure, again, everyone across the firm understands their responsibilities, how to fit in, how to use the tools, the technology, how the measurements work. And then ultimately layering in the different aspects of the group, right? So the communication, the client-facing activities, scheduling or assigning work out to the different resources, and then how the workflow is going to help move, streamline, automate all of the activities across the firm while giving you full visibility into everything in real time.
Thank you, Peter. So as we think about the DMAIC process and some examples that Peter's imparted within that process for all of us, we'll continue with our presentation and go through some real true-to-life examples of customers and case studies, but really some key takeaways we need to ensure you take with you, or we encourage you take with you. If you are about to engage in an improvement project, define your roles. Have that champion who can sweep aside the obstacles, who can clarify an issue, who has the cachet to make a decision that others will follow. Challenge the status quo. Quite simply, don't be afraid to ask why. In fact, ask why multiple times to the same question so that you can continue to refine against the answers. More importantly, and I can't stress this enough, if you allow for personal preference, efficiency gains are going to be few and far between. If you think about the 1040 practice and a partner that might be in charge of your 1040 practice and perhaps against a change in technology because they really know what they're doing in their part of the business, as an example. And I happen to run into those team members often as I move through processes. We need to encourage them to let go of the process of the past and really embrace the technology that your firm has committed to. Continuous process improvement isn't a single one and done outcome. Put new ideas and interesting obstacles you'd look to overcome to a parking lot. Revisit them at the sunset of your project and consider a second layer of engagement to iterate and improve. It's an ongoing effort to improve productivity. Some of the technologies you have now might be able to be deployed differently than you've currently configured them. Will your software vendors, will your teams work together to champion investigation of what you can do differently? Will your new implementations have team members on the services end that can help you walk through building the right business process and ultimately placing that into your technology effectively? As you finish the first 90 days, will they review with you the outcomes and perhaps consider some tweaks and alterations? And then year over year, engaging to continue to refine and improve your process. What we like to think here at Wolters Kluwer at CCH with the XCM products is that technology is what will enable the process. Encouraging visibility to all your team members, having a full and total view of what's happening throughout the assembly line of your tax process, the inventory list of your audits, the overall book of business that you have, that you complete month over month, period over period, year over year. The control to identify bottlenecks and update and implement change, and to deliver quality results. The flexibility to enact continuous improvement. If after the conclusion of your tax season, you need to completely undo your technology to make improvement, consider the technology you're using. Technology should scale with you. And the accountability of a system or set of systems that are integrated together or that are your single and one source of truth related to the alignment of your tasks, your deadlines, and your people. This will only increase accountability, get your team on the same page to complete work, and bring more capacity to your seasons as those seasons grow closer and closer to deadline. If we take for a moment a case study, we have a company that we've engaged, 1,000-person CPA firm, quite large. They share staff through the entire firm. They have many niche areas of their business. And their goal, both with the tax side of the house, but their audit and advisory service, was that workflow amongst the offices wasn't set in a way that they could share resources effectively. Their prior process was paper-driven, extremely inefficient. As they acquired more CPA firms or brought CPA firms through merger and acquisition, the need to ensure that there is a consistent process was only heightened. They had over 50 point solutions for the different practices they focused in that all had elements of workflow, scheduling, productivity, due date management. And they allowed all these team members in the different locations to control their own destiny with how they use them. So now start thinking about what Peter walked us through. From a Lean Six standpoint, personal preference in variation was throughout the business. It took a concerted effort for them to come to agreement on what those processes look like and what they agreed would be the consistent standardization that they would use throughout the business to ensure that they could share resources. Now, ultimately, we're talking about a 1,000-person CPA firm. Whether you're 1,000 people, 5,000 people, 10 individuals, from a remote standpoint, every individual is their own office location. It's really what we're looking at these days. So to ensure that you have process that allows you to engage across teams to one another, if you're an audit team member and ultimately someone else is responsible for the tax work, being able to tag them into the process with the same systems in place, this will ultimately provide a productivity solution. We think Wolters Kluwer here has a solution that addresses all of these pain points, and we encourage you to look at the Access suite of products specifically, as there's a number of opportunities to take business process improvement through Lean Six Sigma projects and outcomes to your technology to really overcome, control, analyze, and take to its essence the outcome of what you're trying to do with an improvement. Now, when we think about eliminating waste, this helps us gain control. So I want to look at some of the ways XCM itself or the workflow tools that we offer can really help you achieve success in increasing productivity. Ultimately, it's on you to look at how work is allocated. Your top performing staff should be aligned to the engagements that provide the most value to your business. You should be minimizing those bottlenecks in workflow, as Peter stated quite eloquently through this presentation. You should ensure that your reviews, your sign-offs, the quality of work being provided to your customers is something that you can stand behind, and you know that the variations aren't in place that diminish the quality of what you're providing them. And ultimately, we talked about the changing landscape of how people get work done these days and how they're enacting and engaging one another. Well, we need to balance that and know what's important versus what's urgent versus what's just the fire drill of the day. So the more you can gain control against where those bottlenecks are and what really impacts your success, the better you are with prioritizing the urgent with the important, with the loudest in the room who gets what they want by simply calling out an obstacle. So what do we mean by that? Well, from an effective collaboration standpoint, we want to ensure that there's the same approach to how your activities are assigned through your business. Whether you're an audit team member, in this example, the assurance service line of a customer from an XCM standpoint, whether it's QC, review, scheduling requirements, those who release draft or final reports, having a single place to go. Whether you are tagged to do that work, you're curious when that work is getting done or prioritized, or you're the tax team that just needs to have a similar look and feel to standardize how we assign work. What we hear from our CPA firms, and an example, that 1,000-person firm in New York, in the New York region, is that one of the things they love is that XCM can be customized to fit the practice. It doesn't mean fit the firm, that means the practice within the firm. Ultimately, you want a system in place that allows you to control your process the way you see fit and allows you to pull from that information or from that workflow system or that productivity tool information that's relevant. In this example, some productivity analysis that you can gain from the data points that are brought into a system like XCM. Whether you're using Power BI, Tableau, your own homegrown analytics solution, you want the system you use to obtain the information and make it available for analysis. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Now, when you think about allowing your benchmarks or your metrics to control the outcome of what your next step is from an improvement standpoint, start looking at systems that allow you to know how long work is sitting. Are you able to look at what's aging? Because if work is sitting, it's not getting through the process fast enough. If you have a specific service level agreement, even internally, where you know that your preparation to review cycle has a certain number of days, are you able to isolate your locations and your individuals that might have work sitting too long and then take action against them? Can you put triggers in place that allow you to dial in? If something is sitting for signature over an X certain amount of days, can you alert someone to that fact and have them take action? Can you reprioritize or reallocate that work to someone else available? Can you smooth out your process to ensure that your capacity and the availability of team members to do work matches the work to be done? For another case study or example, we had a team work with one of our customers to help with the audit process. Now, as we think about the productivity platform that XCM provides, from workflow to scheduling to resource allocation to due date management to issues control and collaboration, ultimately firms similar to your own are looking to grow their business, increase their ability to grow without having to increase top line cost or perhaps increase staffing to do so. If you're building the business and your partners are working on obtaining new engagements with new business, having your team able to take on that work without front loading the hiring process becomes essential for a growing business. So look for a productivity solution that can enable you to hit the ground running with the growth of your business and connecting work as it comes in or as you forecast it to people that can take that work on. The more you know about your business and the people that can complete work, and then connecting that to the work coming through the door, managing that front door, and ultimately increasing the work to the right individuals when they have the capacity to do that, the better off you are and the more likely chance you have to grow your business without having to take on that growth in staff upfront to do so. Now, as we think about another example in product, well, think about that audit submission process. I showed you a financial statement production example, a map around the production process. Well, take that to your systems. Do you have a system in place that can establish a core location where team members can draw work, in this case, draft requests, proofreading, report revisions? Do you have a system that allows that shelf by location, by resource type, by type of activity? Does that information in that system allow you to provide assembly instructions, shipping information, connect it all to a single system so as someone is drafting a request, putting together multiple copies, they know where to send that or have it delivered to, and it's all within the same system, not multiple systems to do so? Are you able to eliminate redundant process in so doing? Whether it's collaborating with other systems to bring sign-off info into a workflow system, XCM APIs allow you that opportunity, or it's consolidating forms, request sheets into your workflow system. Whether it's capturing relevant engagement information that might help you twice annually, or when you have your peer review or PCAOB audits, where knowing the information in one spot allows you to report upon it, and it's being obtained as the engagements themselves are being delivered. But ultimately, our goal is that you take productivity seriously. You have ability to enable some Lean Six Sigma concepts to building out better process, and you understand technology can help you control the outcomes. Before we end today, we're getting close to the end of the session. We have one final polling question that Alyssa will provide now. Alyssa?
Great, thank you, Mark. And we're just going to launch this poll. It's, would you like to learn more about our productivity enablement solution? We'll give everyone about 30 seconds to complete this poll.
And as they're completing the poll, just a note, as we come to the end of the session, we won't be able to directly take questions, but if anyone does have a question that they've asked within the confines of the system, or would like to reach out separately, both Peter and I will be available to get back to you over email, and if necessary, jump on a phone call to talk more. So I do want to thank all of you for attending today and for listening to both Peter Higgins and myself talk through what we're passionate about, and that's productivity enablement, and the solutions we offer to help CPA firms be successful. So on behalf of Peter, Alyssa, and myself, Mark, we wish you a happy rest of your day, and thanks for attending our session.